Hi again, everyone. If this is your first time on the Reliability Matters podcast, welcome to the family. If you've been here before, welcome back. And for those of you who are counting, and I know you are, this is episode number 131. We are all aware of the industry supply chain issues that our industry has faced. Beginning with electronic components, it has spread to many other types of parts that our industry relies on. In fact, it's become a very common go-to excuse when someone doesn't have something in stock. Fortunately, it looks like we're beginning, at least, to come out of the other end of the supply chain shortage. But the supply chain problems have further spread into the labor market. If you're in a position to hire people for your company, you know firsthand how difficult that process can be. Adding to the level of labor acquisition difficulties is the great so-called silver tsunami, otherwise known as the Great Retirement. As I mentioned on our last episode, episode number 130, the fact is baby boomers are entering retirement in greater numbers. According to government data, from now until 2030, 10,000 baby boomers each day will hit retirement age. Let me say that again. 10,000 baby boomers each day will hit retirement age. Millions will begin to officially retire. Some of these retirees are designated subject matter experts within their companies. Not only are people retiring, they are taking with them a vault of valuable knowledge. This has created an even larger demand for consultants within our industry. I've had several industry consultants on my show over the past several years, including today's guest. Who is today's guest, you might ask? Good question. My guest today is legendary industry consultant Bob Willis. If you've been in this industry longer than 18 seconds, there's a good chance you've at least heard his name. If you've been in this industry even longer, there's a very good chance that you've seen his videos or read his books or watched him present at numerous industry conferences and symposiums. If I read Bob's complete professional biography, it would take an entire episode. So, without any further ado, let's have a conversation with my friend and colleague, Bob Willis, as soon as I return in just a moment.
Welcome to Reliability Matters, a podcast for the electronic assembly industry. Each episode covers topics related to reliability, best practices, and environmentally responsible assembly techniques, with insights from experts across the electronic assembly industry. Now, here's your host, Mike Conrad.
Welcome, Bob. Good to see you again.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be talking to you again.
Well, we are probably members, mutual or joint members of the Mutual Admiration Society. I've always admired the work you do and the way you do it. It's very different than, traditional consultants. And we'll get into that a little bit. But before we get started down the Bob Willis rabbit hole, most people in our industry know who you are. If you've been in this industry, I think I said this in the intro, if you've been in this industry more than a few seconds, you've at least heard of Bob Willis. And if you've been in any length of time, of course, they've probably seen your work or seen you. So people know that you're a consultant within our industry. And I'm sure that's just one small sliver of Bob Willis. Share with me and my audience something that most of your colleagues or customers may not know about you.
Well, back in the day when I was a youngster, I used to be a DJ, used to do mobile DJing, and then I went into a club and worked in a couple of clubs. Back in the day that you had played great music, jazz, funk, a little bit of reggae. I did a little bit of radio work. But it was back in the day when you went into a club and you walked across the floor and it was because of all the beer and other things that were on the floor that obviously got cleared up. And you had a panic button. You pushed the panic button when there was a fight and 3 bouncers came in and didn't say, "Sir, we would like you to leave the club." They did it in another way.
Right.
Things have moved on since then.
They opened the door with the guy's head, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Now, so much has changed in the world of DJs. Now, DJs are the main act in many cases, in many clubs. People go just to hear a DJ, not so much the music they're playing, but they've become famous in their own right, for custom mixes and the, the record scratching noise that they keep making. And I'm
Yeah,
dating myself. I sound like an old man now, but
yeah, you're absolutely right. They don't, if they become famous, they don't have to do very much. Back in the day, we bought our own records. You didn't have sponsorship deals. You didn't get free records. You didn't get paid per time you played the record or percentage of sales and all this other stuff that's gone in. And there's a very good friend of mine who became a DJ way before my time. I took on his role in the club because unfortunately his daughter was ill just after she was born. So he wasn't feeling very well. So I just took it on for a couple of hours, and he sat in the corner. And unfortunately, I had a girlfriend with me, and boy, she was upset, because 3 hours just twiddling her thumbs while I was having fun. But I was helping somebody out that was ill. So things change. Things change over the years.
And speaking of things changing, for years, for decades, you've been consulting on the subject of electronic assembly, surface mount, all of that. You've been producing video content. You've been speaking at conferences and forums. You've been writing books and designing posters on best practices in a variety of subjects within our space. And that, in great part, is coming to an end. You have been threatening this for a long time. I've known you for years, and I think you've been alluding to it for a while, but it seems to be here now. You're retiring. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, pretty much. I still like to do what I do, and I would still continue to do what I do. To help companies out, because I find it great fun, and it's really nice when somebody takes a little bit of advice and proves it's right. But I always try and say something and then justify it by showing it happening or not happening, as the case may be. It's very easy for a consultant to just say, well, do this, do that, and it might work. It might improve your process. I like to actually, what they call, walk the talk as well as talk the talk. Which unfortunately doesn't necessarily always happen within our industry, but that's kind of, I guess, what makes me slightly different. And I've created hundreds of videos, small videos, over the years to show something happening, because I think you can talk about something, but if you can show it happening, then that's believable. Some of it is perhaps not absolutely accurate from a technical point of view, but it shows the concept. It shows a solder joint failing. It shows dendrite formation. It shows components failing because of poor cleaning practice. Those sort of things. And it kind of, rather than a static picture, I've always found that is much more valuable to show engineers or show or prove a point.
Right. So you've almost answered a question I haven't asked yet, a couple pages away from here, but I'm just going to skip to that, and I'm going to ask the question which you partially answered, and then we'll go a little deeper. It's been said that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and if that is true, a video is probably worth 1,000,000 words, right? And I love working with video. You and I share that passion of being able to not just talk about or write about, but actually show. And I find that medium very successful. What motivated you to start producing video? Because today it's a lot easier to produce than it was 20 years ago when we first started playing with it. But it's still not easy. It's for some people it's just easier to explain, or write than produce a video, because video has a lot of elements to it. You still have to write. You still have to, you still have to create something, but it's a little bit more complex, more moving parts, pardon the pun. What was your motivation to start doing that, and how did you learn that craft?
Well, first of all, the motivation was fairly simple. When I started working for NEPCON back in the day, and obviously then IPC Apex, I started off with all of my workshops, you got a free video. So that made me different straight away. So if somebody signed up for a half-day workshop, they got a video. So I produced videos for the workshops I taught. And of course, that was another income stream in those days. It was, fairly unique. And there was only one other person who was doing it at that time. The big problem was coming to America, because we have a thing called VHS. You have a thing called VHS NTC format. So it's a different format, PAL to. So I had to go to a place and have them converted and produced for me. And then I thought, this is ridiculous. We've got all these big, bulky tapes that I take, 30, 40, 50, depending on the number of delegates that are going to be there. And of course, you have to take a couple of extras, late sign-ups for workshops. So I thought, let's get into interactive CDs. So we're still producing the video content. We're producing text that goes with it, and pictures and moving pictures. So that was sort of the next iteration. And then I started to get into webinars, and I kind of think that apart from IMAPs, I was the first guy to do training webinars in our space of electronics. And I did those for quite a few years, way before the pandemic. And again, that was great because people could come along, listen to something, ask questions. So I never got bored with doing the 60-minute presentation and then having the 30 minutes of questions afterwards. It didn't bother me, I was happy, that was great fun. And then I went into, because I'd taken so many photographs over the years, right from the very, very start when I was a young engineer, which were low resolution in those days. So, they were high resolution to us, 640 by 480.
In those days, it was high resolution.
Well, yeah. And I can remember, having one of those Sony disc cameras. You put your floppy disk in and took pictures. That was sort of like my third generation camera. So then I took all those pictures and sold them online on the website. But, still to this day, a 640 a 480 image of, let's say, a solder joint or pore cleaning, can go into any PowerPoint presentation and still look amazing. But you've got these marketing people who think you need, 6 million megabyte picture to show something that's pretty irrelevant anyway. So sometimes people criticize the pictures for being, I said, what do you want to use it for? I want to put it on a website. I want to put it in a PowerPoint presentation. Well, why do you need it bigger? So those, that's, and then the posters came along, because originally the posters were all printed posters. They were A3 color posters that we put into a Jiffy bag or a big Jiffy bag and sent them worldwide. And I thought, why don't I just produce PDFs and say to a company, if you want to print more, be my guest, but don't give it to somebody else to print. You buy it, Mr. Radio, whoever, use it in your own company, print a load of copies if you wish. And then it was, the profitability went up dramatically. So that's sort of all the products that I used to produce. But I used them for my own training activity, but also made them available.
Yeah, excellent. So as I stated in the intro, most of the time when someone retires, they take with them pretty much everything they know, right? They pack up their coffee cup, they get their golden ashtray or watch, and they leave with all their knowledge. This is a little bit different in your case, because you've kind of left us a legacy behind, which is vast amounts of training material, as we've been talking about. And you've recently donated much of that training material to SMTA. Tell me what specific types of training material you've made available to SMTA, and the motivation to do that, as opposed to, just leaving it on an online store and, waking up in the morning with more money in your bank account than when you went to bed the night before.
That would be a novelty, wouldn't it? But in our business, that doesn't really work quite that way. But seriously, it's supposed to work that way. But seriously, I didn't want this material just to disappear. What's the point? There is a value to some people. So I had a conversation and thought, well, how can I monetize it, but not for me, for charity? So I said to Ryan at SMTA originally, I said, look, you know the stuff. You haven't sold millions of these things. You haven't, sort of made a fortune out of it. But how about if I give it to you, we find a sponsor for it, and then you make it available. And the guys at SMTA thought it was a good idea. They wanted to make it available originally to members only. I said, no, that's not going to happen. If you want it and you want the kudos of having it all and the marketing associated with it, that's fine. But I want it to be freely available to anybody. Of course, hopefully, people will realize the benefits and join, because SMTA is really fairly inexpensive for what you can get out of it.
Since I'm not selling SMTA, Bob, this has nothing to do with me being on the board of directors, but it is only 6 cents a day.
No, well, I didn't know that fact, but it's ridiculous. In all honesty, it's ridiculous. So, any engineer, be a student, could afford to pay for an individual membership and reap the benefits out of it. And I'm not doing it because you told me to do it. I truly believe it. And I believed it when we had Smart Group. Smart Group was the group that started exactly the same year as SMTA. SMTA was phenomenally successful. Smart Group, in its own little way, in the UK, was very successful. And then obviously we've morphed and become, part of SMTA. So I got a sponsor, and we got an agreement going. So half of the money went to a cancer charity, and half the money went to the Hutchins Fund, scholarship fund.
Charles Hutchins, yeah.
Yeah, because I knew the guy. I'd met him. Interesting character, being a Texan, quite loud, very, very, very open. But he was always in the conference speaker's office, like me, early. You got the other guys turn up with about 3 minutes to spare before they give their presentation, and then whinge that their projector's not working. And
the last 3 minutes, they were actually making changes to their presentation. I've seen those people. Yeah.
Well, no. In those days, it was, I'll have that slide there. No,
there you go.
Better make sure it's the right way around. No. It's not this PowerPoint stuff. It was
right.
It and overheads as well.
Overhead projectors. Yes, I remember those days with your transparencies. Yeah.
But it was great because you could actually get moving images. You could put some water underneath your slide, and you could actually make it move and vibrate. There's loads of stuff.
I remember one of my first time presenting. It was using those transparencies, and it redefined the term crash. The crash was when you dropped your transparencies, and all 30 of them are now in random order. Right? And that was always an issue. But we've come a long way.
We have, and I think some people have mastered the craft of PowerPoint a little better than others. Some of them are very good, very slick, and some of them, oh dear.
I actually teach a course on SMTA. SMTA sells the course, and it's called "How to Avoid Death by PowerPoint." And I show a film clip, a still of a very popular American TV show called Brady Bunch, right? And the intro to the show is 9 squares, each square with one of the Brady Bunch family members in it. And I'm like, they were the original Zoom family, right? And then I show a still of what it would be like today if the Brady Bunch were out today. And it would be like Marsha is all blurry and Greg has a cat in front of him, and Jan Brady is underlit and Peter Brady is overlit, and I can't tell you how many PowerPoint presentations and Zoom meetings and all that have just been so cringeworthy. You'd rather grind glass in your eye than sit through it, right? I mean, the content might be good, but the knowledge that you can take out of it might be good. You just can't get through it. It's awful.
Well, a good presenter with a good presentation is wonderful. Very, very good content and a mediocre presentation is very good content, but both of them, bad, is not very good.
Right. I totally agree. And we've all sat through, you being a regular speaker, or me being a regular speaker, we've all sat through the rest of the conferences, and some of them are a little harder than others, and some of them are really inspiring, and they'll inspire you to up your game. You're one of those inspiring people.
Oh, no, I mean, I think I would suggest that, I learn every day. I hope that I learn every day. And when you see a technique, or you see a method of presentation, a method of sharing information, I mean, I can remember 2 specific videos of failures of BGA joints that I saw somebody do. And I thought, that is amazing. I'm going to do that. But I hadn't got the budget. So I did, I did the Bob Willis version of it. It still did the same thing. It still showed the solder joint separating through poor control of double-sided reflow heat. But the other company had a bigger budget. So it was much classier. But mine still did the same job, so I take inspiration sometimes from other things as well.
A college version versus a Steven Spielberg version, right? Right.
Great analogy.
Well, Steven Spielberg's first theatrical release was a movie called Duel with Dennis Weaver, and it was actually a college project that he had. So, there's hope for all of us, right? We can all start there and become him. So for over 30 years, you've been providing training and consultancy to companies within our industry. Is there a particular course or subject that has proven to be most popular? In other words, is there a subject that just won't die and you're constantly teaching it?
Well, I haven't taught this particular course for probably 2 years. But if you look at all of the courses that I've done over the years, because I used to run all the training for Electrovert consulting services in the UK and Europe, I did wave soldering courses. So I did a 2-day course, I did a 1-day theoretical course, and a 1-day hands-on course. And I did that month on month on month for easily 10 years and probably more. So on the wave soldering side, and some of the people, and you'll mention it later on, who've made donations to my new book. It was really nice and flattering that, they'd made they actually sort of mentioned it to me, we're making a donation because we've been in the industry a long time now, but we very first started coming to one of your wave solder courses. And it's great. They're now senior managers, but, they were sitting on seats, uncomfortable seats, because I bought them. They were very, very inexpensive for 2 days. And part of it was a little bit of hands-on as well. So that's sort of the number one course. But the courses that I get more fun out of nowadays, and when I've gone to different countries, to Singapore, Malaysia, China, doing courses on hand soldering and rework. And so, doing rework courses and, how you can improve this, how you can do this, how you can make it better. Because operators want to know how to do something and how to do it better. So they don't want any BS, which engineers will probably put up with. If you can't do it, if you can't show it, they're not interested. They want to know and see how to do it. So that is demanding, far more demanding than any theoretical course.
Yeah. You talk about hand soldering. I was talking to someone yesterday about an upcoming episode. We're doing a rework episode coming up in a few weeks. And the context of the conversation was how hand soldering is really a science and an art. And someone said, no, it's not an art, it's pure science. And I said, well, every time I go to a major trade show, an Apex or something, someone is sponsoring a hand soldering contest, right? No one sponsors an AOI contest. No one sponsors a solder printing contest, right? But when you get contestants to sign up to win a prize and be judged by the quality of their work, there's artwork there, right? There's a skill level there. Call it art, call it skill, but it's still not everyone possesses the same ability. It's not everyone can push a green button. There's nuances to it, and there's science involved. And
absolutely. But I'm slightly frustrated that the organization concerned, who has been running these courses for quite a few years, with sponsors, I said to them back in the day, you've got to move on. Fine, that's great. You're doing a great job, making lots of money, but you've got to go the next step. And we've got to start to talk about rework and repair of boards. So I developed a whole course, which I ran twice, once in, well, not a course, it's really the experience. I called it the experience, like all the other things I do. And it was exactly the same concept, that you've got 6, 8, 10 people together, and they all did the same thing. They reworked well, they actually built the board first of all. They built it with BGAs and CSPs and more small chip components, and then they reworked it. So they had to demonstrate they could put it back together, because if you just took the things off, you'd need new things, new components, so the price would go up of the course, and etc. So I did it the other way around. You got to build it first, and then you got to take them off, and then it didn't matter so much if you couldn't really use the BGA. So the whole thing was in place, the inspection criteria, all that sort of stuff, and we did it twice. And I said to the organization concerned, you can have the rights to it. Don't say it was your course. I dreamed it all up. I've given it to you. You can do it worldwide. I don't mind. And they never did. There are so many companies who've got some splendid rework equipment, both manual and fully automatic. Why can't they just move it on? But perhaps it was one of my bad ideas. I don't know.
Well, who knows? From your perspective, Bob, what are some of the most common mistakes made in the assembly process? Either legacy mistakes or that still occur, or a new mistake that you see. What are the common ones?
All of the above. Because even in the last year, I've been looking at process failures, process defects, etc., which I was looking at, and that's not me boasting in any way. It's just I still see a lot of people making the same mistakes or having the same problems. So there is solutions, easy things. I can say, okay, here's something I've done. Here's a picture. Here's a video. Look at this, and you'll see why. So generally speaking, that's what's happening. I think that still there's a lot of improvements that could be made through, design, but the fundamental parts of the process, you've still got to spend a little bit of time understanding, spend more time on the shop floor, not looking at stats that come out of SPI and AOI machines. Look at the real thing, because those machines will cut down your workload, but you still got to look at the real thing. So that would be my advice. Don't spend too much time drinking coffee, reading a textbook. Get there on the shop floor, speak to the operators, because the operators see it day in, day out. You don't, as an engineer. So they see things, but you might be able to pick up that bit of information and put the jigsaw together to solve a particular problem.
Yeah, when I first started my company 32 years ago, at some point in my journey, I joined a CEO peer group. Basically, we'd meet once a month and lie to each other about how well we're doing. And we'd have a speaker come in from time to time. And one of the speakers said, you need to MBWA. I'm like, what's MBWA? It's like management by walking around. And it was because you have to get out of your tower and walk around the floor. And I started doing that. And, I don't have a, 8 million person company. But I would get out of my office and I would walk around the factory floor, and I would, with no agenda, just start talking to people. And as I got known for doing that, people would share things with me that they might not otherwise share with me. And a person would express a frustration about something here, and then I talked to a person here, and I realized that if these two just communicated, even though they're in very different departments, I became the common conduit for solutions. And it's not like I had to create a solution. I just needed to know, this person needs to know the trouble you're having here, because they're the ones responsible to fix it. And it's just amazing what you learn when you just walk around and talk to people. So I would imagine when you get on the scene of a new client, I'm just guessing, I don't know, I could be totally wrong, that one of the things you want to do is say, leave me alone, let me just walk around and talk to people. Is that a common practice in your world?
Yes, but no. It's only happened to me twice. One is with a well-known company who is Nokia, and I was just, come along, spend the day, wander around. We'll get you to do a presentation at the end of the day, what you thought, what you saw, but just wander around, talk to people, look at what they're doing, and that was really, really fun. And it's exactly as you described. You saw something over there and thought, hold on a minute, if we had a word with this other guy over here, he may be able to solve that particular problem. Right. So it's only happened twice, but Nokia is the one that really sticks in my mind. They allowed me to do it. It was servers. It wasn't mobile phones. It was big server boards. But they had, a phenomenal facility, and it was just great. The beer was good as well.
I'll bet, yes. What types of questions, when you're looking at, if a customer is looking to engage you in consulting services, what kind of questions do you ask them? And, how do you prep them before you accept them as a customer?
Well, bear in mind that it doesn't happen now, really.
But in the past.
Okay. Well, the first thing I would say is, well, show me. Just show me what the problem is. Show me a good photograph of what the problem is. And I still do this today when somebody asks, can you tell me about this or that? I say, well, just show me a photograph. And you can take it with your mobile phone. Just make sure it's in focus and get as close as you can before you send it. And if you do that, that's, a long way to hopefully solving a problem for them. Next thing is, if I'm doing failure analysis, what I want to know, and this is either with the company who's producing a product and having a failure, or a company that is employing a subcontractor. I have basically a very simple form, and it details all of the processes, all of the parameters on the processes, and I say to them, right, so we've got a failure. I think it's in there. So I want everything filled in up until that point. So if it's first side reflow, I want, what board you're using, what finish you're using, what solder paste you're using, what you're printing, how thick the print, all the sort of techie stuff. But I also say, when I'm going to design engineers and they're vetting a subcontractor, I say, use the same form, get them to imagine a board, or if you're giving them a board to do their first run on DFM review, get them to fill that form in. You've got all this process, and let's say your first batch of boards are wonderful, they sail through test, everybody's excited, you're going to place a £1 million order, a £1 billion order with this company. Make sure you've got that documentation, because then you know how that product was built. You know what materials, what process was used. You've got everything. Now, you're not going to take that and go somewhere else, but you can retain that information. When you have a failure, you don't need me. You don't need an engineer who really understands the process. You just need that bunch of bits of paper, because you can go and check the production line yourself and see what's changed. Very, very simple, but it works.
So we asked, you answered the question, what do you ask your prospective customers? If a company is looking, if they have a problem and they're looking for a consultant, what questions would you want to see, or information, or what types of information should they have before they make a decision on who to hire? How do they be a smart consumer of consulting services?
I think the first thing to do is make sure that they've got their own team involved. Evidence that their engineers, their quality staff, their designers, their purchasing people have had a conversation and, figured out what they think might be the problem, and perhaps eliminated some of the obvious things that it's not. Mm-hmm. If it's let's say you contact me and said, look, Bob, I've got this problem. Can you tell me the solution? I really want to get a different perspective. So if we could get some sort of input from 3 or 4 different people, then they've had a conversation, so they're serious about what they want to do. They seriously want to solve the problem because they spent time and effort, and obviously financially they've invested in the problem. So I want to see some evidence of that. That's kind of normal.
Have you ever experienced a shoot the messenger scenario where you provide very raw advice or data back to the customer and Bob, you're wrong. It can't be that way. Do you ever get the brunt end of that?
Well, yeah, I mean, you do get it from time to time where people would say, well, no, we tried that. No, somebody else suggested that, and we've changed that from a blue one to a pink one, and it didn't solve the problem. So you get that. But the most annoying issue, and I had a conversation just literally today about this, is companies saying, yep, we understand that. So why haven't you fixed it? We can't change that. Our customer won't allow us to change. So you found the problem, you've identified, you've switched the switch the other way, you've put it on to off or 30 to 22 on the dial, and the problem's gone away, and you've gone back to 30 and it's come back again. Yep. So you proved you can fix the problem. Yeah, but we can't do that because we're medical or we're aerospace or we're automotive. Can't change that. Can't change anything. So why are you bothering me then? Right. If you don't want to fix the problem, what's the point in hiring a consultant? I can show you and agree with you and confirm that what you've done is logical. But if you're not willing to, or the other thing is, please put me in front of your customer. Let's talk it together. So often, companies don't want to get other people involved, and it's the same as when you're purchasing something. If you want to purchase a printed circuit board, let's say you want to purchase a new cleaner. Let's get the cleaner guy in with the engineer, with the quality guy, with the purchasing guy, and sit down and talk about it. The cost, time, all the sort of commercial and technical issues. And so, are you going to buy it or aren't you going to buy it? Not this back and thought, I want 10% off. I want a free training. Come on, let's just get together like adults and talk about it.
Right.
It'd be much quicker for everybody.
I in my experience as manufacturing and selling capital equipment, I'm going to assume that your experience as a consultant is very similar, and that is there has to be near universal buy-in. If we have a rogue engineer who wants to get a certain type of equipment and their team, the tribe, is like, no, we don't want that type of equipment, it's just not going to be successful. It's always going to break, and there will always be pushback. And then it's just so hard. And then everyone starts digging in, right? And then it's just impossible to solve. So a lot of that work has to be done first. So I would imagine in your world as a consultant, it would be wise anyway to have an agreement up front. Like, I'm going to suggest things, don't reject them out of hand, even if you've tried them before. We're going to do things a little different. There's almost needs to be like a Geneva Convention, a rules of warfare, or in this case, consulting, at how to receive that advice with an open mind, almost with a beginner's mindset. Did you set your clients up? Did you set your clients up in advance to receive news they may, you suspect they may push back on? Do you train the client how to be trained?
No, I don't necessarily think that's happened, but it has happened, yes, in so much that I've proved that the direction they want to go in is perhaps the wrong direction. I mean, classic example, small palm top computers. They were having tremendous problems with rework and repair. They wanted to buy some new equipment. They wanted to buy 4 pieces of equipment, 1 for each production line. because they were having problems with a particular part. And I said, okay, great. I'll get 4 or 5 suppliers in. All of your team will come and have a play. We'll rework some product with the production staff, who they're the people who are actually going to use it. And we'll do that. We did that. And then the second day, when we got rid of all of the sales guys out of the way, and everybody was happy, they'd all tried equipment. I said, I got these 2 pieces of equipment out, put them on the table. We did exactly the same thing, and 3 of the staff didn't know they already owned that equipment. So I then said to all the guys, we had an open meeting afterwards, which equipment did you like? Which one, found the easiest? And 4 out of the people said, we like that stuff that, you found locally. And I said, well, you already own that. Somebody had decided that it wasn't any good. They kept burning boards. And it was simply that nobody had trained them how to use it. So I'd saved them a hell of a lot of money. The staff were happy because they liked that. It was kind of nice and simple to use. And, and I'm sure that goes on all the time. Your analogy about pushback, because I don't like that process. I want to go solvent clean. I don't want to go water wash. I want to go ultrasonic clean. I don't want to use full immersion, whatever it might be. But, the reality is that we're trying to meet a standard. We're trying to meet a quality level. And if both of those types of equipment can do that, then it comes down to sort of the commercial side and the longevity side, the support of the support of the supplier, etc. Those other factors come into play. The first thing, technically, it has to do what you want it to do.
How does the expert stay the expert? How when you're in the world, back in the day when you were doing regular consulting and you were in the trenches, how did you and how do you stay up to date on emerging technologies?
As much as possible, use these as much as possible. I mean, if we look at production lines, I used to do production lines at exhibitions called the Bob Willis Experience. It's the Bob Willis printing experience, the Bob Willis conformal coating, the Bob Willis cleaning
we were involved
experience.
In that once. Yeah, we were cleaning boards in your booth at one point.
Yeah. And also at IPC, we had those sort of different test boards and things. Yeah, I mean, that was fun because when I had those sort of, production line type things, we could do the stuff that we were trying to do to show the customer. We could do the stuff which ultimately, hopefully, sold a piece of equipment for somebody. But I had the time to play. So I had all this equipment that I could, I was paid to be there and I could play. So I could build boards, I could use a different type of solder paste, nothing to do with perhaps, the sponsor solder paste, but I could, I just got all this equipment to play with, and I did it for, quite a few years. So that was something that I really enjoyed doing. It took a lot out of me because, I was there way before all the sales guys and techies turned up playing. And then I would normally spend a bit of time afterwards playing, but it allowed me to learn from experience. And wherever I could or wherever I can, I would, love to do that. I mean, it's part of the reason, for the subject we'll talk about, the book, the robotic experience. I came up with this idea just before COVID, and it's in the book, it says COVID-1 robotic soldering experience nil. Because we came up with this concept, and my good friends who are exhibition organizers, we came up with this idea about having the robotic soldering experience. So we'd have a number of robot suppliers there, some cord wire suppliers, components, boards, etc. And we'd all do stuff. We'd assess them. We would do microsections, and and people could come along, but because of COVID, that stopped and we couldn't do it. So we had a venue, everything was, there to go. I'd made the videos, the promo videos, the defect of the month, etc. So that's my one failure, but it's kind of failure because, out of my hands, obviously, but it was something that we just couldn't continue and get off the ground because of, the terrible thing that's happened to the world. which it's a real regret of mine. It's probably one of the reasons, that I wanted to do something more on that particular subject. So I was fortunate enough to do a project on high temperature solders. So with MPL, using robotic soldering, and this is a few years back now, and then obviously repeat that exercise more recently for my more recent work. And that's, one of the reasons why I will be at Productronica as well. And that would be my last time at Productronica, unfortunately, but I'll be having fun.
Well, there you go. We talked a little bit about philanthropy. We talked about your book. You've merged those two subjects together. So let's dive into your new book. First of all, about robotic soldering. Tell me more about that, and then talk to me about how anyone can receive a copy of your book and benefit the charity that you've chosen to support.
It sounds like breakfast TV, doesn't it?
It does, doesn't it? Yeah. Only I'm not the cute hostess. I
was just about to say that. Perhaps you bring on the cute hostess next to you, and come up with the other questions.
It's me and Bob. It doesn't get any worse than we're like late night versions of that, right?
Okay. All right. So I had this sort of idea about putting together all the information, and I still have heaps of stuff that won't be included. A book. Because I've written a couple of books before, one on package technology, one on pin and hole intrusive reflow, and I've written sort of quite a few photo guides on conformal coating, on PCB surface finish, blah blah blah. So I wanted to produce a book on robotic soldering. So it's the basic stuff. What is it? Laser, contact soldering, design rules, all that sort of, stuff, and defects at the end. And, there's links directly to video clips I've produced on selected defects. So it's there. It was supposed to be 80 pages. It's now over 98, I think, pages. And I've had 2 forwards written by good friends of mine on what they thought about the book, etc. So the idea is it will be free. I was originally looking for sponsors, corporate sponsors, because that was nice and easy. Because if I could get a couple of big companies putting in a couple of $1,000 or a couple of £1,000 each, that was great. That was the starting point. That hasn't happened yet. It might still happen before Productronica. That would be great. They could have a free ad and all that sort of good stuff. They could then download it from their website. So it's a sales opportunity, a promotional opportunity, even if they're not directly involved in the technology. The other side of it, it will be available after its launch at Productronica on a Just Giving page, just a donation page, and I've already had £300-400 already donated just from engineers who responded, who were interested and just donated something, and they'll get the book at some point in the future. Well, November. So that's how it's sort of come about, and there are improvements in it. There's other things I could add. There's new stuff coming out. And I've sent a draft copy to all of the robotic suppliers saying, this is what I've done. What do you think? Any criticisms, comments, suggestions, etc. Let me know. It's just bringing all this information together in my own experience so far. And there's some guys in the industry who've had a phenomenal amount of experience in this and were very, very experienced when I started. So they obviously are a lot more experienced now. And because of the interest, and if you, it's like any process, if you get it right, it can be an incredible technology. And it allows engineers to say, okay, I'm interested in this and I can implement it, etc. But they've got to bring the staff along with them. And they've got to say to, let's say, 1 or 2 staff, that we're gonna have a robot and it's going to do what you do. However, what we want, our end game is to have 3 or 4 robots, and you 2 look after those 3 or 4 robots. So they're learning a new skill, because of their experience, they can see much more quickly than an engineer what's going wrong,
right,
and be able to say, okay, put my hand up, ask this particular question. They will gain more experience in the technology, and that's a beautiful thing.
yeah, absolutely. Now, for my listeners and my viewers, this is sounding more like breakfast television now that you mention it. But for our listeners and viewers around the world, if you would like to get more information on Bob's book and how to acquire it, go, if you're listening to this on your favorite podcast app, as soon as you pull over, and it's safe to do so, click on the show notes for this episode. This is episode, I forget the number, but you'll find it. If you're listening to it, then obviously you already know. Look at the show notes, and there'll be information. It'll be a link to the giving page where you can make a donation and receive a copy of the book. If you're watching this on YouTube, right below me, there's a little button that says show more. Click that and you'll see a link again to the giving page and Bob's website and all of that. I don't try and book him for a consultancy, though. He will probably be scuba diving in Tahiti or Grand Cayman or who knows where. I know that's one of your other a little bit more well-known activities. Do you plan? A lot of people retire, and retirement's taken a different meaning. Back in my dad's days, retirement meant you walked out of the office and you never worked again professionally. Retirement now is I'm retired, and I think I'm busier in retirement doing professional things like this than I was before. Do you think you'll still do some spot consulting here and there? Will there be things that kind of drag you back in a little bit?
Yes, I mean there was somebody who contacted me literally, I think between our previous two conversations of only a week, but somebody is interested in implementing low temperature solders, and it's another area of interest of mine that I did some work over the last sort of 4 or 5 years. And so they've obviously been offered some materials, quite seriously by a particular vendor. And I said, well, the first thing to do is let's have a look at your product. Forget about the materials for a moment. There are lots of good materials out there. First thing is let's see if it's appropriate to you. You've already been told that you can save loads and loads of money from your process and your energy costs, etc., and do some stuff for the environment as well. But let's sort of look at the product first of all. So that's something. And I said, look, again, I said, and this is sort of kind of like an open invitation. If you want me to be online talking as we are today and go through the issues, etc., you just make a donation to the charity, and I'm happy.
Wow.
Because I'm doing what I'm enjoying doing. If you want to buy me a beer sometime or a cup of coffee sometime as well, that's fine.
Right.
That's fine as well.
Right.
But it keeps me involved. It keeps my interest. It utilizes the skills that I've developed over a couple of topics more recently that people are starting to pick up on, and that's fun. That's good. It's what I do, or what I've done for quite a few years.
Last couple of questions. Get out your crystal ball and tell me what you see as upcoming challenges in our industry. We have IoT that's relatively new. We have the electrification of cars and autonomous cars, all this stuff. What in your professional opinion and all your vast experience represents the greatest challenge for our industry?
Well, first, I think the most obvious one is miniaturization of anything, be it components. We've talked about small chips, 0201, 01005, half the size of that and half the size of that. They exist. I've processed them, I've reworked them. They exist. But we then start to infringe on the tolerances of the other materials. So if we look at PCB materials, they have not kept up. So the tolerances on the parts and the tolerances on the PCBs, you can't, kind of get them to made up. And it's the same with the robotic soldering side of things. So many people go with their board and their components to a supplier and say, I'd like to do some trials. Okay. So how are you going to hold the board and how are you going to hold the components together while this machine is doing it? Oh, we hadn't thought of that. And how will the robot, after you programmed it, know where the board is? So they have to sort of relearn the fiducials or the tolerances on a board if they're using fixtures and jigs, because those are the sort of things you learn when you were doing standard SMT. So I think it's all about miniaturization and the components, and also the other substrates and materials that we need to deal with. And some of those have always been a challenge and will continue to be a challenge for engineers to deal with.
There's a phenomenon I've talked about many times on the show. You've heard it before with one term or another. But, it's been referred to as the silver tsunami or the great retirement. There's a lot of, the fact is baby boomers are leaving, are retiring at the highest rate of any group in the history of mankind. In the U.S. alone, and I'm sure it's proportionately the same in other countries, it's estimated that between now and 2030, 10,000 baby boomers each day will officially retire. We're the largest demographic group in North America anyway, and a lot of them are facing retirement in the next 10 years or so. So that's created a burden on our industry as experts leave. But it also has created an opportunity, because we're seeing now more and more younger people finally enter our industry. What's your advice for young people entering our industry? Say they leave university with a degree in electrical engineering or whatever, and they show up and they're green otherwise. What's your best advice for them as they start to work on a factory floor?
Best advice for anybody who's kind of a senior level, somebody who's coming out of university, is to spend time in every area of the factory. It's exactly like craft apprentices used to do when we did craft apprenticeships. You learnt milling, turning, all the stuff I hated, because you smelt with all the coolant. It's very unpleasant. And my mother used to send me to the bottom of the garden to take all of the clothes off before I came in the house. But seriously, going to each of the areas of the factory and just understanding, spending 2 or 3 days, maybe a week at each step in the manufacturing process. And we did the same thing with lecturers who were training some of our students that were on degree courses or scientific courses. We got them to spend time. So I can remember 2 of them who've gone on to do other stuff now, and they came into our factory and they wanted to learn. So we put them in each of these different places. They learned the skills and then went on and on. So the 2 things sort of married together in the end, not for that generation of engineers, but for the next generation of engineers. Everybody benefited. So that would be my advice. Try and spend a bit of time at each step in the manufacturing process. Don't go in there and try and solve everything with a squiggly chart or a set of graphs. Look at the basics of what you're doing. And again, if we go back to SMT, I can remember I was a quality engineer working for the quality director, so I had no remit to build boards or make stuff. But when SMT was first dreamed up, I went on the shop floor, I got a batch of boards, I got a batch of components which I purchased, and started building stuff. And it was allowing me to learn. And then operators said, well, what are these little square things? And what are these things with legs on? They're different. And don't they go through holes? And then that got me into training, because every Friday afternoon when it was clean down day, I would do a training course for the staff. Anybody could join in with manager's permission, but it had to be a topic related to the business. And that was successful. But that's how I originally got into training. So I would say, go to the different steps in the process, understand a little bit about the process before you ever try to implement change.
Sound advice from a sound consultant. Bob, thank you for being my guest today. And thank you on on behalf of the entire electronics industry, I'll be the spokesman, or at least the self-appointed spokesman. Thank you for all the years of good advice you've given our industry and all the educational material you've provided. And thanks also for making much of that information available in perpetuity to SMTA and the other ways you give away your information. I was not expecting, when I asked you, are you really retired? Are you still going to get some gigs here and there? That you've even offered to do some virtual consulting in exchange for a donation to a charity. I mean, that's amazing. That speaks a lot about not just your technical capabilities, but your character. So thank you for supporting our industry all those years. I look forward to bumping into you either underwater wearing scuba gear or somewhere on the planet. You love to travel as I do, so one of these days we'll bump into each other and we'll have that beer.
Well, you can hopefully edit some of my drone video one day.
Oh yeah, I've never gotten into drones. I used to fly planes. I have a pilot's license, and I've always been into aviation. Before I actually got my pilot's license, I used to fly RC planes, and I've always been interested in drones, and I've just never quite, had the opportunity to spend time with them, although I'm fascinated with them. And fortunately now, drones, I think, are a little easier to fly than the early days of drones, because the early days of drones, they were really joystick flying, right? And now, they'll hold, they'll come back, they'll avoid obstacles kind of without the operator having to get too involved. So I think that will be my next hobby, because I enjoy photography, I enjoy videography, I enjoy anything to do with anything that defies gravity. So I think that'll be my next. My wife will call it my next vice. I'll call it my next hobby.
Well, it's worth the investment, because if you get a particular subject, I mean, obviously, because I'm still playing walking football, I can video a match, and then we can take and say, well, you should have moved there, or you should have moved there, and that's just so revealing. And there's a friend of mine who's a very good goalkeeper. He gets really annoyed when I miss one of his great saves. He's less excited when I show him how he missed a save.
Right.
But when you can get it from like two or three angles, and it's not trying to embarrass him in any way, because he truly wants to improve. He wants to find out, how could I do better? And it's just a unique tool to be able to do that.
Yeah. Oh, it definitely has my attention. And like I said, I'll start playing with that someday soon. I just have to figure out how to get drone footage into Reliability Matters podcast.
Well, I find one of the a representative from one of the manufacturers, because the technology built into the drones today is significantly small, obviously,
yes. Light,
significantly reliable.
Right.
I would say, and I've had one particular drone that I took for a swim and put it in rice for about 3 months, and it still worked afterwards. And even when I looked inside, you could see a little bit of corrosion. I was lucky it wasn't salt water, but it still worked. So it obviously had some sort of coating on it, but they wouldn't confirm whether it was a formal coating or just a displacement coating material. But
clearly that's a harsh environment situation. I mean, these drones, they can fly inside, but they're really designed to fly outside in the elements and shock and vibration and moisture and
all of the above. But there are many things like that, toys and things that go through incredible stresses, and perhaps we don't learn from some of the fairly inexpensive equipment, because the design for manufacture in certain instances has to go into far more detail for some of these products, but we dismiss them because they're relatively inexpensive. But there's a credible amount of technology, so it would be a fascinating subject. However, because of the well-known suppliers being all from China, they're probably less likely to talk openly about it, and certainly not talk about failures.
Yeah, I've long said that we need a new class system for IPC, classes. We have class 1, 2, 3, and then we have a space addendum. I think we almost need a Class H, harsh environment, because in order to build even toys that work in a harsh environment, you have to adopt closer to Class 3 standards, but not for the same reasons. It's not because if it fails, people die. So I think there's certain elements of Class 3 that are suitable for harsh environments. Not everything in Class 3 has to be adopted, for a drone or a Hasbro toy, or connected football or something. But Class 1 classifications or standards or levels of quality are just not suitable for most harsh environment applications, even if the cost of failure is nothing. Products still are expected to work. You don't want to buy your 6-year-old grandson a toy and have it fail in 3 days, right? Because it wasn't designed for the environment it was being used in. So there's almost this, I think, this need to have a carve-out standard that really is just for harsh environments, because so many products are going into harsh environments. Your comment when I asked you earlier, what's the most challenging part of our industry, you said miniaturization, and I totally agree with that. And I think that's caused or exacerbated by harsh environments, because miniaturization becomes more problematic when the environments are harsher, because the space between the conductors is so much smaller. So we're on the same page there. But anyway, I digress.
However,
I was saying goodbye, and we started a whole nother podcast.
However, I must just finish on that point that I've always said there is no reason with a fairly good design and fairly good components and processes that everybody could meet one standard. They could meet level 3. Why have 3?
Right.
1 is perfectly right. And if you look at the latitude within Class 3, if you keep saying, I've passed Class 3, just about, you could get better. You've got to improve on that. Otherwise, you get worse. So I've never agreed having a class system. 1 class and 3, the worst end of Class 3 and the best end of Class 3, there's your tolerance.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, and I think the current situations within the electronic space are kind of proving that out, because more and more people are adopting a higher standard, even though technically they wouldn't have been associated with that standard, but that's the only way to get the stuff to work. So the motivation is a little different. People making missiles are just going to adopt Class 3. People making cell phones are going to adopt Class 2. People making electronic toys, Teddy Ruxpins or whatever, are going to adopt Class 1 because that's what they think they have to do.
But only because they're scared that something might go wrong, and they might find out that it's a design related or component related. It's got nothing to do with the solder joint.
Right, exactly. Well, okay, I see we do have some topics for our next interview. I will follow up with you in less than a year, and we'll find out what Bob Willis 2.0 or 3.0 or 10.0, whatever version of Bob Willis there is by then, is doing. So, Bob, thanks again. Again, listeners and viewers, check the show notes, get information on how to acquire Bob's book. And thanks for being here, Bob. As usual, it's a joy to talk to you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Well, that's another episode. Thank you for listening to or watching the Reliability Matters podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast app. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, be sure and click the like, subscribe, and bell icons to be notified when new episodes are released. We release new episodes on the 2nd and 4th Tuesday of every month. A special thanks to Circuit Assembly Magazine's PCB Chat at pcbchat.com and Ascendo Reliability at reliability.fm for syndicating this show. Thanks again for being part of our podcast family. Until I see you again, stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy, and perhaps most importantly, keep doing it right. I'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Thanks for listening to the Reliability Matters podcast. Join us on the 2nd and 4th Tuesday of each month for new episodes of Reliability Matters.